The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald is a cautionary tale of what it means to chase the American dream, pursue love, and experience tragedy. The story is set during the Roaring Twenties in New York City, surrounded by the neighborhoods of East Egg and West Egg. East Egg representing the old money class in society, and West Egg representing the American dream and the new money class in society. The Great Gatsby begins with Nick Carraway being introduced as the narrator of the story and a character in the book. He is a young man from Minnesota who moved to New York City to work in the bonding business. He rents a small house hidden between mansions in the West Egg neighborhood, which is described as a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow. Later, Nick drives with his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom Buchanan to have dinner later that evening. Nick and Tom knew each other from Yale University. After arriving, Nick meets Jordan Baker, a professional golfer who had a masculine personality. Nick felt drawn to her captivating personality, and Tom and Daisy hinted that he should even take a romantic interest in her. When Nick arrives to his house, he sees a mysterious man named Jay Gatsby sitting in the lawn of a lavish Gothic mansion next to Nick's cottage from the end of his dock. When Nick looks into the water to his neighbor's mansion, he sees a distant green light that he can only reach out to. This represents his passion to achieve the American dream. Chapter 2 opens up in New York's Valley of Ashes, representing the lower class in society. Above the ashes lie a billboard with the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, representing the eyes of God. Tom and Nick take a train together to meet Myrtle and George Wilson, who live in the Valley of Ashes. George is described as a lifeless yet handsome man who is Myrtle's husband. Myrtle is described as a stocky and sensuous woman who is George's wife and is also having an affair with Tom. Later, they throw a party in their apartment where Nick meets Myrtle's sister, Catherine, and the McGee couple. During the party, Catherine tells Nick that Jay Gatsby is the nephew or cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm, which was the cruel dictator of Germany during the Great War. Soon, everyone in the party gets drunk, in which Nick claims that he got drunk for only the second time in his life in that party. During the event, as Myrtle got drunker and drunker, she became louder and louder and developed an obnoxious behavior. She starts talking about Tom's wife, Daisy, and immediately Tom warns her to never talk about his wife. Myrtle then starts yelling Daisy's name over and over, and in response, Tom breaks her nose, bringing the party to a stop. Nick and Mr. McGee later take the 4 a.m. train back to Long Island. The next day, Nick is surprised with an invitation to one of Gatsby's lavishing parties. Even though no one is invited, people still spend their days off at Gatsby's parties, which struck Nick. When Nick arrives at the party, rumors of Gatsby spread during the festival, claiming that Gatsby was a German spy, a graduate of Oxford, and even a killer. Amid hearing these rumors about Gatsby, Nick runs into Jordan Baker. Wondering who this host is, they both set off to find Gatsby, but then run into a man with large owl-like spectacles in Gatsby's library. Nick named the man Owl Eyes after his appearance. Nick and Jordan both return outside and sit at a table with a handsome but recognizable figure. Nick and the man both realize that they served in the same army during the Great War. The man then introduces himself as Jay Gatsby with a formal, elaborate, and new-moneyed personality. Jay Gatsby chooses not to drink but watches his party guests in silence, making him a mystery. Later at night, Gatsby's butler tells Jordan that Gatsby would like to see her. After meeting with Gatsby, Jordan tells Nick that she heard surprising news but cannot reveal what she spoke about with Gatsby yet. At the end of the party, Nick walks home seeing Owl Eyes struggling to get his car out of a ditch from an accident. Nick starts following Daisy and Tom's advice and starts seeking a romantic interest with Jordan Baker, even though he knows that she is a dishonest person. Chapter 4 begins with Nick listing all of the attendants of Gatsby's parties that summer. Nick then describes a trip he had with Gatsby to eat lunch. As Jay Gatsby describes his past to Nick during the drive, Nick realizes that his story seems suspicious. For example, when Gatsby claimed that he was the son of a wealthy and deceased parents from the Midwest, Nick asked which Midwestern city Gatsby was from. Gatsby replied San Francisco. Gatsby then claims that he is a graduate from Oxford, a European jewel collector, has hunted large game, and has been awarded medals during World War I. After seeing Nick's suspicion, Gatsby shows Nick a medal from Montenegro and a picture of him playing cricket at Oxford. After having lunch with Jay Gatsby, Nick meets up with Jordan. Jordan then tells Nick the details of her secret conversation with Gatsby from earlier. Jordan reveals that Gatsby is in love with Daisy and that during the war, Daisy fell in love with Jake Gatsby until Gatsby was stationed for war. After not returning for years, Daisy chose to marry Tom but drank herself to numbness when she received a letter at the night before her wedding, symbolizing her regret. Jordan also revealed that Gatsby asked her to convince Nick to set up a reunion for tea at Nick's house between Gatsby and Daisy, since Jay is scared that Daisy would refuse to see him. Chapter 5 starts after Nick comes home from a date with Jordan. Nick sees Gatsby's mansion lit up brightly in the middle of the night and is surprised to see so. While Nick is walking home, Gatsby approaches him and invites him to Coney Island and then for a swim in his pool in order to convince him to set up the surprise date with him and Daisy. Nick realizes what Gatsby is trying to do and then tells him that he will help him with the plan after seeing how nervous Gatsby was. In response, Gatsby becomes extremely overjoyed and offers someone to cut his grass and make him money on the side. Nick is slightly offended but still agrees to continue with the plan. On the day of the meeting, it began to rain and Gatsby became worried that things between him and Daisy wouldn't be the same after the war. Since the war. At the start, the meeting between Daisy and Gatsby is awfully awkward, and in response, Nick decides to leave them alone for half an hour. When he came back, Nick found that both of them were extremely happy together. Gatsby shows Nick and Daisy his luxurious lifestyles and possessions, making Daisy overwhelmed. When Gatsby showed her his collection of English shirts, she began to cry after realizing that this could have been the life that she had. Nick realizes that Gatsby and Daisy have forgotten that he was there and leaves them alone in the mansion. Chapter 6 starts with news reporters traveling to Gatsby's mansion to learn about him. Nick interrupts the story to tell Gatsby's real history. Jay Gatsby's name is revealed as James Gatz, and the reason why he changed his name was because after working for 2 weeks of janitorial work, he saw a rich yacht owner named Dan Cody who offered Gatsby to work as his personal assistant. After living a life of wealth and luxury with Cody, Gatsby's new personal goal was to become a successful man. When Cody died, he left Gatsby $2,500, but Cody's mistress didn't let Gatsby claim the inheritance. I meant $25,000. After this, James Gatz decided to change his name to Jay Gatsby. Later, Nick stops by Gatsby's house and is surprised to see Tom in there having a drink with the Sloanes. After telling Tom that he knows Gatsby, he invites him and the Sloanes to stay for dinner, but they decline. They then invite Gatsby to be polite, in which Gatsby accepts, showing his lack of social skills. This makes Tom suspicious of Gatsby's behavior with Daisy when they are alone together. Though Tom hasn't discovered their affair yet, later Tom and Daisy go to one of Gatsby's party in order for Tom to look out for Daisy's behavior with Gatsby. Daisy ends up not being interested in the party, saying that it's overwhelming. Tom later tells Daisy that Gatsby's fortune comes from bootlegging, and in response, Daisy says that Gatsby's money comes from a chain of drugstores that he owns. Chapter 7 starts in a suite at a Plaza Hotel with Daisy, Gatsby, Nick, and others. Tom confronts Gatsby and mocks his habit of calling people old sport. Then Tom accuses Gatsby of lying about his personal life, specifically about attending Oxford. In defense, Gatsby says that he did attend Oxford for 5 months in an army program. When Tom asks Gatsby about his intentions for Daisy, Gatsby says that Daisy loves him, not Tom. During the argument, Daisy starts feeling herself moving closer to Tom. Confident that Daisy loves Tom and not Gatsby, Tom sends Daisy and Gatsby together in a car to Long Island. After the quarrel, Nick realizes that it's his 30th birthday. When Nick, Tom, and Jordan drove back to Long Island together, they discovered a frightening scene in the Valley of Ashes. Someone was killed by a running car. A Greek man running the restaurant next to the scene tells the group that Myrtle was killed after escaping from Mr. Wilson's apartment, which she was locked there after George found out that she was having an affair with someone else. Nick also realizes that Myrtle was probably hit by Gatsby's car, and Tom assumes that Gatsby was the one driving. When Nick arrives at Tom's house, he finds Gatsby hiding in the bushes. He tells Nick that Daisy was the one driving the car when Myrtle was run over. Gatsby, worried about Daisy, sends Nick to check on her, but find Tom and Daisy eating cold fried chicken and talking, suggesting that they reconciled their differences. This leaves Nick slightly disgusted. After the incident, Nick restlessly visits Gatsby's mansion and finds that Gatsby's been waiting at Tom's house until 4 a.m. to see if Daisy could have been hurt. Nick tells Gatsby to forget about Daisy since she's already reconciled her relationship with Tom, but Gatsby refuses to leave Daisy behind for another time. Gatsby then tells Nick about his past with Daisy during the war. Gatsby says that when he and Daisy made love, he felt as if he were married to her and couldn't bear to leave her again. Gatsby's gardener interrupts the conversation between Nick and Gatsby to tell them that he plans to drain the pool. Though Gatsby tells the gardener to wait for a day since he never used the pool and wanted to go for a swim. Nick says goodbye to Gatsby since he was late to work and shouts to Gatsby that he is worth more than his friends. When Nick goes to his office to work, he becomes too distracted and even declined to meet Jordan for a date since he was too focused on the incident regarding Myrtle's death. When Myrtle died, George Wilson stayed up all night talking to Michaelis about the accident. When Wilson walked into the Valley of Ashes and saw the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eichelberg, symbolizing God, he believed that the person who killed Myrtle must have been her lover and came to the conclusion that God demanded revenge. When Wilson looked for Tom, he realized that Tom could not have killed Myrtle since he arrived after the accident in a different car. When he met with Tom, Tom told him that Gatsby must have killed Myrtle instead. As Gatsby is swimming in his pool, George Wilson arrives with a gun and shoots Gatsby and then shoots himself. When Nick comes back to West Egg, he finds Gatsby dead and is devastated that he couldn't reach his dream life with Daisy. Nick writes the events that unfolded 2 years after Gatsby's death. Swarms of news reporters and journalists created wild and untrue stories of the aftermath of the murder. Feeling bad, Nick tries to hold a large funeral for him, but all of Gatsby's friends have disappeared. Tom and Daisy moved away without warning, Mayor Wolfshine declined to come, and so did Klipspringer. The only people to attend Gatsby's funeral were Nick, allies, Gatsby's father, and some of his butlers. Henry Gatz claimed to be proud of his son and tells Nick what Gatsby's early life was like. Feeling disgusted about New York City, Nick decided to move back to the Midwest and break up with Jordan. As he leaves, Nick bumps into Tom. During the conversation, Tom tells Nick that he was the one who told Wilson that Gatsby drove the car that killed Myrtle. Tom then says that Gatsby deserved to die anyways. Nick comes to the conclusion that Tom and Daisy and all of his friends were careless and uncaring people. He feels sorry for Gatsby's dream, feeling empty after visiting his abandoned mansion. Jay Gatsby was described as a young man who rose from being impoverished in North Dakota to becoming extremely wealthy. He is characterized as a mysterious man whose love interest is Daisy Buchanan. His real name is James Gatz and became wealthy by doing illegal activities. Even though it seems like he has achieved the American dream, he was never able to achieve the love he longed for. Nick Carraway is the narrator and lead character of the novel who moved to West Egg for his bonding business. He is Jay Gatsby's neighbor and longs to achieve the American dream. He is one of the only friends of Gatsby who truly cared for him, especially after being one of the only people to attend his funeral. His love interest was Jordan Bakers until he broke up with her to move back to the Midwest. Daisy is described as charming, young, and innocent. Daisy is known for her old money, wealth, and beauty. She is married to Tom Buchanan, but was interested in Jay Gatsby after the secret team meeting. She leaves Gatsby for Tom after the quarrel between Gatsby and Tom. Tom is described as aggressive and arrogant. He is married to Daisy, but is having an affair with Myrtle. He held a grudge against Gatsby and blamed him for killing George Wilson's wife, Myrtle. Tom stated that Gatsby deserved to die. Jordan is described as a woman with a masculine personality. She is a professional golfer who is Nick Carraway's love interest. She is dishonest, self-centered, and alluring. Myrtle is George Wilson's wife and Tom's mistress who dreams of escaping her low-class life. Desperate of achieving elite status, she has an affair with Tom. When her husband found out that she was cheating on him, she was locked in a room, but escaped and then killed by a moving vehicle. George Wilson is Myrtle's husband who has an apartment in the Valley of Ashes. After finding out that his wife Myrtle was killed, he seeks revenge, leading to killing Jay Gatsby and then killing himself. Owlies hangs out around Jay Gatsby's library and is called Owlies for having enormous owl-like glasses. He is one of the only people who attended Gatsby's funeral. Klipspringer is a freeloader who lives in Gatsby's mansion without permission. After Gatsby's death, he only called Nick to retrieve his forgotten tennis shoes instead of attending his funeral. Mayor Wolfsheim is Gatsby's associate, who is a shady businessman. He symbolizes the criminality between Jay Gatsby's wealth. Dan Cody inspired Jay Gatsby to live a successful and wealthy lifestyle after being seen in a rich yacht. Jay Gatsby named himself from James Gatz to his current name after Dan Cody. Henry Gatz is Gatsby's father, who attended Jay Gatsby's funeral and told Nick of Jay's past and how proud he was of his son.